Hello and welcome to today's episode of Fearless Conversations. My name is Downtown and this is Jade Lotso, Rochelle Ragusi, and we are talking about confidence today. How you walk in confidence, what does confidence look like to you? And so I'm just going to start by sharing my thoughts, and then the ladies are going to chime in and give us their perspective. One thing that comes to mind, if I were to ask myself or somebody were to ask me, what makes a confident woman? How do you walk in confidence? I think you first go back to what is the opposite of confidence. And so what comes to mind for me is insecurity or unworthiness, fearfulness. And so I think first, if you are thinking about how can I be more confident in my daily life, how can I be more confident as a woman, how can I be more confident as a mom or a wife or in my career, it's really dealing with the opposite of those things. So if you have any insecurity or feelings of unworthiness, feelings of fear, when you tackle those things, I feel like that's the first step to really stepping into the confident version of you that you want to walk in. And so I know we've talked about in times before finding your identity in Christ and having that as your base and going from there as God leads you. So I would say number one, deal with any insecurity or unworthiness that you feel. And when I say deal with it, just doesn't mean like just deal with this like in this harsh way. It just basically means I feel like really diving deep on where did this first start in me? If I'm feeling a lack of confidence, where did this first start? If I have insecurity or anything like that, really diving deep with the Lord and asking Him to heal any places that need to be healed, and then I can start to move forward from there. And I have some additional thoughts, but curious on what you guys are thinking in terms of how you can move forward in confidence. So.
When I think confidence, I think purpose. Like I think like really connecting to why you're doing, because you can say in so many different areas, well, I'm confident in this area, this area, this area. What comes to mind recently, because it's something I was talking about this week, is the idea of false humility. Like humility, an honest evaluation of ourselves. We humble, those who humble themselves before God, He exalts. And so there's just when I think of humility, like it's a great place, and I think like when it's this growing place, like we're getting our message, our confidence, we're getting our purpose, and there comes a point where you're mature and you're not like thinking so much about yourself. Like it's more about, this is important, I need to do it. And that's when you're breaking through fear, and that's when you're, I think, more confident because you're owning your life message, if you will. And so when I think of false humility, I think it's like when it appears that, I don't want the spotlight. Like, okay, if you just want the spotlight and that's what you're going, like most people aren't like that, you know what I mean? But if you are, then maybe people can check their motives if it's all about the spotlight and then, if that's all that matters. But I would say the majority of people aren't like seeking a spotlight, but a lot of people are actually hiding from it because of false humility. And I think it's like almost, I don't want the spotlight, almost this thing of like, you can self-deprecate, you can have you can mull in your self-esteem. But I think as we mature in Christ, there's a place where you come and you deal with that and you realize what you carry the goods, and what you carry is more important, and that it gets out to people who need it. It's more important than my insecurities or my lack of self-confidence, all these different things. And I think to grow in confidence, you really need to grow in purpose, and like what's in you needs to burn so it comes out, because there's a lot of walls and stuff that has to break through.
I love that. I'm actually like really resonating with what you're saying, because I agree. I've never been very confident just in myself, like as a person. Like I've always been really, I hold back. I really, it wasn't a false humility. I just want to be like back. I don't want people looking at me. I want to be, I just want to be thinking. I don't, and so this isn't something that I feel like I could go out and just teach a lot of people like how to be confident. But I do agree with what you're saying when you have a purpose and you have a calling, and God has equipped you in such a way that you can fully operate in confidence in that area, and it's not about you. And so I agree. Like there are certain areas where I have felt confident in, and I think that if we could latch a hold of that and know like this is something that is a purpose that God has given me in life, and He has equipped me to do this, and I can operate in that. And I think the more that you dive into those things that you know for a fact, like this is what God has called you to do, He's equipped you for this. And I kind of talked about that, I think just episodes prior, like maybe really early on where I talked about identifying at least one or two little things. They don't have to be big things that you can do and you know you can do well, and operate in that, and you can grow from there. And for me, it's always been writing. I've always felt confident in my writing, and now, you know, I'm growing as a writer, and I feel confident in that. And there's also times where you feel really confident, and then sometimes you kind of get toppled over, like in motherhood. When I had Deja young, but she was so compliant, and I just thought my sister's daughter, we had them a day apart, and she was so wild and so unruly, and I was just like, wow, I have a really good mom. Like, look at this, like, look how good she is. And then we had Ellery. And she was wild. Like, she's the quiet and shy one now, but she has a fire in her where if things did not work out the way that she thought they would, she would be screaming for like literal hours. She'd be beet red, drenched in sweat, and she had to change into her pajamas when she was in the middle of an outburst. She had to have her Sophia pajamas. They would go on, and she'd have to have her blanket, and I'm like, pushing her in her room, shutting the door. I'm like, we do not have to be exposed to this for 2 hours. It was nuts. And I started thinking, and I really stepped back, and I thought, okay, other parents that deal with unruly children, it isn't always a lack of discipline or a lack of whatever you think it is. And it isn't just that you're number one mom and they don't know what they're doing. It's kids are all different. And I think that was a really good wake up call for me. And then now we've since moved beyond that crazy to all kinds of other crazy. And it's like, if anybody saw me out, like, I'm like a zookeeper. I'm like a mom anymore. But I do think that God has his ways of when you put yourself too high up there, like, I'm just number one mom, like, I'm really good at this. Like, he's going to be like, you know what? Check this out. And then, and then he gives you an Ellery or something. And I think that you can rebuild that confidence in a healthier way through those experiences.
That's, that just so gets me to think, like, that's just so God to stop us in that, because just think about how can we give that away? Like, if we are number one, like that, like, how do we encourage someone? It's like you could even give like a great word, but like there's empowerment. There's something about being authentic and like struggling. Then from that place, like we have like God, like we can give the grace of God, because that's what we needed. And there's something like, I think that posture, if what we can never, it closes our door of influence, if we're just number one, then we can invite people to worship us because we're number one, but like, as far as like real relationship or like having real empowerment, like empowering other people, it's like, I think the number one thing that closes that off. It reminds me of, I think it was Rachel Hollis. She was sharing, like, she was so appalled by, like, some celebrity shared, like, they asked her a question, like, how do you do it all? And instead of giving, like, a humble answer, well, I'm just an admin. Like, it was just, she just went to her, like, she's like, I wanted to hear the, like, because she's like, if someone asks me that, it's because of my team, or it's because of, like this more of, like, it's more than just me having it all together, and so just sharing that reminded me of that story. There's something about, we all are good at stuff. It's not like you can't be good at stuff, but it's just really that posture and like this place where we can really care to reach people and to not, and that's like the vibe I think you have to fight through with Facebook too, because it's not about like obviously we don't just put our best face out just because we want to look all great. It's all about, it's actually sad because people who do that just need that affirmation from other people, and that's going to be there and it's going to not be there. And it's either going to, if you live off the praise of man, when you don't have it, it's going to kill you, so it's like God's so gracious to bring us into that place where we don't live off of either. Like, we're right here steady, in that place of grace with him, and we can still be good at stuff, but you know what I mean? It's just like this thing, we can't get it combined. Like, if we're off on it, it doesn't do us any good.
Yeah. I was just going to say, just quickly, too, on a practical level, I think with confidence, I think the more that you step out and you gain experience in something, you gain confidence that way. Because I can think to my last job how, I started my last job, I wasn't very confident, I didn't know exactly what to do or how to do it. But the more I stepped into that and I walked that out and had the experience of it, I learned to be more confident. So just even on a practical level, I think confidence can come from experience. And then if we're taking this even deeper to stepping out and living in your purpose and all of that, the more that you push yourself to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and doing that, I do feel like that helps to build your confidence.
And I think the purest form of confidence is always married with humbleness. So kind of like what you were
That's
talking
good.
about, I think if we want to really operate in confidence, it always has to be accompanied by humbleness. And they are a balance with each other. Yeah. And I think too, one other little thing that I'd share is it also matters who you surround yourself with. So another area of confidence that I feel is I'm confident in just my role as a wife. Razzie and I just, I don't know, we just love each other a lot, and we just always want to be around each other. And it's not that every marriage has to be like that, but the fact that the way that he treats me and makes me feel as a wife and how I would, treat him as a husband has a lot to do with how he feels as a husband and how I feel as a wife. So I think making sure that, and that can obviously go beyond marriage, but it matters who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah, I think that's huge too. I mean, that almost leads back to the conversation we had on mentorship, where I can think of when Luke and I, I was very young when we got married, and I feel like part of the way we were able to deal with the challenges that come with a very young marriage is getting around other older seasoned people who were married to see, oh, this is what it's supposed to look like, and just having their mentorship and their just seeing how they walk out marriage and how they walk out loving each other. So I think that's very powerful too. Oh, no, were you going to say a thought?
Well, I was thinking about it, and then I was just like, we had a conversation before, and it's kind of interesting, like, how we can, like, obviously we have different circles. You have your intimate circles where you share more details and like there's that trust, but then like we were also talking about like leadership and how like authentic, like people who are authentic really connect, they have the most influence because they're just like, there's like people can write in on that in the sense of, oh, you're real, and you're, like if you're succeeding or if you're moving forward and you've struggled here too,
Yeah.
So I was just thinking about like the difference of, what's too much and what isn't, and what's safe to share, and like, what does that look like?
That's a good question. Yeah, this is a different aspect of it, but I shared even on YouTube a few weeks ago about how steps to share your personal story, or intimate details of your story. And one of my pieces of advice too is, and I'm sure this is going to get some pushback, or not everybody probably agrees with it, but don't share when you're high on emotion. Because I think sometimes you can overshare and then you're panicked, like, oh my God, what did I say? And you can start to like, what a backpedal. So when it comes to, wanting to share and be authentic with an audience so that you can help people, I think part of my advice would be making sure that you found healing in the area that you want to share. Like, I think sharing from a raw place can be harmful for not just your audience, but yourself. So making sure that you're sharing from a place of healing. Not that you have to wait till you're perfect to share, because we're never going to get to quote unquote perfection. But I think, sharing from a place of healing or growth would be one of my tips. Do you have anything that comes to mind?
I mean, I think it would just be wise to really vet the people that you're sharing things with, because I think that we can, again, just get really comfortable or think that we're comfortable with somebody and we're sharing things that person has no business knowing. And how do you vet those people out? I just think let time be a test, I guess. Like, you can share, I would just build that up, like share little things at a time and see how they receive it and see what they do with it. Because you can tell somebody something and then you want it to be in confidence, and later find out like they're sharing this with all these other people. I mean, just do it in increments, really. Like, if you're going to be intimate with somebody, maybe start with something small and see how they receive it. And I think that time builds that up. And there are some people that they just have a personality where you just instantly feel like, Razzie and I, we constantly were talking about this, because people will just come up to us, like they kind of know us or know of us, and they'll come up and we'll just engage in conversation with us. And then Razzie's like, especially him, it happens to him way more than it happens to me, but it happens to me from time to time too, where they just share things with Razzie, and I don't know what it is about him, but they're like, yeah, I don't know, I just feel like I can talk to you, and they'll just come up and they'll like, I don't know, it'd just be like a random time, and it, I think it's something that kind of maybe he developed as a salesman, just working for so long, where he just kind of has this approachable, like, you can share things with me, and it is really funny though, because he'll come home and be like, I don't know if they should have been talking to me about this, like, I don't even know them that well, and it's really funny because there are just people like that, and so I mean, if you see Razzie and that happens to you, I think you can feel safe with that. But there are people that also, it's like, what is it, a wolf in sheep's clothing, where they seem really approachable and like you can trust them and they're not. And so I don't know. I just advise being careful with who you share things with. But there is times where we're going to share things that vulnerable things from our life that we're okay with sharing with the masses. But like you said, be in a place where you're ready to share that. And I think people do like rawness and authenticity, but I think it is, like you said, very important to make sure that we have a grasp, at least to some extent, of our emotions. I'll share things and I'll still, like, my voice will quiver and it's hard for me to talk about just without crying. And it doesn't mean that I'm not ready to share that with people. It just means that that's still so much a part of me. So I don't know. There's a lot of different aspects and angles to look at it, but I think just be careful with who you're sharing private things with, and let time be a test to that. And yeah, just be controlled when you're sharing things. Don't overshare to the masses if you're not ready, if you're not in that place.
And this is just simple advice, but it was just coming even as you were saying that, because like to literally use the same rules when you're in conversation with people, like you think before you speak. Yeah. Don't say hurtful things, or are we, I mean, that's so simple and basic, but I think that would protect us from a lot of things, sometimes people are more confident in their writing, than speaking, but it's you could kind of have the same words and realize that it still has that same relational impact. It's just going out in a different medium, I should say. But yeah, those were good.
Yeah, I was also going to say too, another philosophy, and I know it's been said before, I'm not like inventing the new wheel, but is if people are gossiping to you, they're going to be gossiping about you. Mm-hmm. So that's just a general rule too on who you can trust and share. And what you were referencing on testing the waters, it's funny that you said that, because it jogged my memory. Like, I so remember thinking through processes like that on how I established friendships when I was, several years ago. I would share a little bit, just and let time be the test of, okay, do I cook? Am I coming back to hear that later from somebody else that went on to be shared? I do think there's wisdom in that, and I think there's a balance too of, I know, since I'm more of a quiet, private person, sometimes I probably don't share enough in some ways, and I let fear take over. So I think that there can be a balance in some of that, and like you said, there's so many different nuances and aspects to this conversation. So, because I never, when I was saying don't share high in emotion, I never want to convey, because there's times where you can be emotional and you're sharing and it's needed. But I think, there's different aspects, and your own personal story, and I think God, as you stay sensitive to the Holy Spirit, God will lead you on how to share as well.
And I think it is important for everyone to have somebody, like a go-to person that they can vent to, not gossip about somebody, but if you're just having a really rough time, we don't just always have it all together all the time. Like, we need somebody that we can talk to and that they can then kind of shoot back at us, like, hey, did you try this? And I think one piece of advice that I heard, and I think it was more of in a church setting, but I think if you apply this where you're working, you need to have somebody outside of your work that you can talk to about work issues, because they don't have any skin in the game. Like, you're going to them and it's not going to create this unhealthy work environment, but you're able to be honest and real. And then maybe they can give you outside, like, just listening to this, it sounds like this, somebody who's not invested emotionally into what's going on in your workplace or wherever you're having this issue at, that it's somebody outside looking in. They have your back, but they also have, how do I want to say, they can just come back to you and say, like, I'm noticing this, and you can't necessarily take it personally, because they don't have any skin in the game. Like I said, like, they don't have anything to gain from this other than just helping their friend. So if we could all have somebody that we could go to like that. That's nice.
Yeah. Another thing that comes to mind too, not to make this conversation like drag on forever, but it's just jogging my memory because there's just so many interesting things I think we could talk about. Is when you're doing life with people, it can be messy because none of us are perfect. We're gonna say the wrong thing. We're gonna offend when we don't mean to offend. But I think it's having a posture of humility that we've talked about in previous episodes, and I think what's come up in this conversation, and that when you do open up sometimes with people that you're close with. Life is messy, and if you know that you're keeping your heart close to God, and you know that who you're doing life with is keeping their life close to God, just being willing to forgive, and of course boundaries where they're appropriate to have boundaries, but just remembering that life can be messy at times, and we're not perfect, but to love each other through our messiness, and just be perfectly imperfect. I don't know.
Yeah, it's beautifully said, and it's one of my favorite things to talk about or think about because I've needed it so much in my life. But it, like, as a peacemaker or one that doesn't like to have hard conversations, just kind of changing my perspective with it and realizing that healthy confrontation is a good thing. Mm-hmm. And it's all about our approach. Like, there's ways to approach. Like, you don't have to be rude. Yeah. You don't have to be like, like you can literally approach the conversation in a mature manner. Like, you know what? And if you use feeling words like how you feel and you approach it with that rather than saying you or just put it, you do this and just pinning it on people, but just being like, when this happened, it made me feel this way. Like that could really take something that could be an ugly, ugly conversation into something that is beautiful at the end where you realize, hey, thank you. You shared your heart. And now you could share your heart with me too. And this is what healthy relationship is. It doesn't mean there's never confrontations. And like you said, things can get messy. But this is such a huge tool, I think, for us all to walk in and for the church to know too, because I think that'll kill the gossip because you're knowing how to do relationship. You talk it through. You don't need to talk through with 10 other people that, so.
Yeah. And to recognize your character flaws and make sure that you are giving grace to the character flaws of who you're talking to, because you talked about, coming in and having this confrontation, but doing it gently. But there are type A's, type A personalities that come in and they think they're being gentle, but they're just being a bulldozer. And for me, as somebody who I take things really personally, I'm like, everybody's out to get me. Like, if you come at me like a bulldozer, I know that you're out to get me. And they think, oh, that's perfect. No, I was just perfectly pleasant. Like, we have to know who we're talking to, and we know their personality, and not read into things. Like, I have to step outside of myself and say, like, where I think that they're coming at me, I need to look like, who is this person? What are they actually trying to say to me? I think we would do well to just recognize that, just always know what your weaknesses are. And I always have to step back because I think somebody could put up a passive aggressive status on Facebook. It could literally be about somebody's cat. And I'm like, I know they're talking about me. Like, they mean this about me. And it's like, I always have to take a step back because I take things personal and I feel like people are just out to get me.
I so relate to
that. Yeah. And so, but for the other people, that are bulldozers, like they hopefully will eventually come to a place where they recognize that. And I just see it a lot when people approach my husband, like, so I get defensive for him. I'm like, they're being so rude to you. And he's like, what? And I'm like, they're just being so mean, and I can see it. And it's like, you just have to step back and know who the person is and what they're trying to say. And so
I'm going to take that advice. You got me cracking up because I'm like, oh, that's going to help my marriage. Because I'm just like, oh yeah, that's not how I heard it. Like, yeah. And to not be like too sense, like I could be very sensitive, And so to kind of have that perspective, you can. And what I've found myself, you can share your feelings, but you can be so caught up on your feelings, like that you're hanging on to them, like So it's this process of letting it go and really understanding each other.
Yeah, believing the best about each other. I mean, I know you can't always do that as a whole, especially if true colors are shown and things like that. But at least operating from the initial stance of believing the best about somebody else. Yeah, this has been a great conversation. I feel like, there's been some grace on this. It was good.
Yeah. So.